We have international affairs analyst Dan Perry joining us, along with Colonel in the Reserves Dr. Jacques Neria, the former foreign policy advisor to former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran joining us as well. So interesting what Zach had to say towards the end of his update from the north, essentially speaking to the fact that Hezbollah is looking at what's happening in Jerusalem in terms of its decision making. We know that there are reports going around right now that the Prime Minister of Israel is planning to fire current Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Do these reports hold any sway? Is there any truth to them? And what would that ultimately mean for the country?
Well, you know, it's said, of course, that history repeats itself. First is tragedy, then is farce. Israel already occupied South Lebanon for 18 years. It did not go well. It was an extremely tragic experience. And now we learn that after 11 months and more of ridiculously tolerating nonstop attacks by Hezbollah, instead of organizing a more clever way out of this, the government's plan is to reoccupy southern Lebanon again and remain there in a buffer zone. And not only that,
what would that clever way look like?
Well, to complete the thought, the farce is that this is being done by removing the defense minister, who's the only popular member of the government because he opposes it, and the military also opposes it. The more clever way, I think, would have been from the beginning to internationalize this conflict, to explain that this is Lebanon attacking Israel, it's unacceptable, to organize a global coalition, to have retained the moral high ground that Israel had on October 7th, and to not tolerate it at all. But to create a situation where you have to go in, you have the true backing of the world as opposed to your only ally, the U.S., sending over here an envoy, doesn't even bother with Lebanon, goes only to Israel to pressure Israel not to proceed, which would mean to continue to absorb a year of attacks from Hezbollah, which has hijacked what pretends to be a foreign sovereign country. So, look, from the beginning, Israel chose, instead of a strategic approach to the cataclysm of October 7th, instead using blunt force ineffectively but brutally in Gaza, and using a moderate amount of force equally ineffectively in the north. And I would say the last thing Israel needs in a situation where the 60,000 people in the north are begging to return to their homes is not only an invasion of Lebanon, but an invasion that is being described as something that will last for a long time. Right. You'd think if they go in, they'd make it fast, effective and elegant.
I think that the idea is, as I said, to secure and in order to initiate a diplomatic movement and compel the Lebanese government, which is right now looking at Hezbollah and doing nothing. So I mean, after all, we are being attacked by a militia, which is not even part of the Lebanese government. It's not even registered at the Lebanese.
The question is whether or not the Lebanese government at this point has any legitimacy.
Well, they have an army, 70,000 soldiers. They can use it, and they didn't use it ever against Hezbollah.
All right, quick response.
I do agree with Jacques that a good outcome would be to create a situation where Hezbollah is gone from the south, and what replaces it, if not the Lebanese army, which does exist, is some sort of international force. There's no way Israel can tolerate Hezbollah remaining on the border again.
Right.
We will not announce in advance our retaliatory actions for Haniyeh's assassination. Since the assassination, the America-led West has sent us a message hoping that Iran would not take any retaliatory action. But there will definitely be a response to Haniyeh's assassination from us. It is just up to us to decide when that is going to happen, and we will make sure that our response is meticulously and well planned.
All right, I'd like to turn back to our guests in the studio. Dan Perry, you specifically, I know that you want to speak on this. Saudi Arabia has been calling for more pressure on Iran as the Houthi threat grows. Are we going to be seeing more international military pressure? Is it time to do that?
I have no evidence that we will, but I think it is time to do that. Look, it's one of the big questions of geopolitics. When do you intervene in another country? Iran ticks every one of the boxes that might justify it. They're horribly oppressive to their own people. They're a danger to the region with all these proxies everywhere. Just spoke about the outrageous Houthis. And they are a danger to the world with their insistence on becoming a nuclear weapon state. So there have been two models in how to deal with them. One has been an effort to cajole them into some sort of deal only on the weapons program. That was the Democratic Obama model. And Trump, of course, is the isolationist, let's stay away and hope sanctions do the trick talk loudly, carry a very small stick. I think it's time for a third model, where the world basically says the game is up, Islamic Republic. If you want us not to really take strong and immediate action, you need to end the rocket program, hand over your nuclear material, and stop aiding the proxies. Now, I'm not saying they're going to agree and just fold, but if they don't, it's time to threaten credibly and maybe follow through on blockading their ports, destroying their oil fields, certainly destroying their nuclear facilities, and also at local infrastructure, such as to encourage a revolution so that the great people of Iran can finally have a government that is not an international rogue. I think the West needs to simply change the entire approach to Iran and threaten war.
We're seeing kind of across international headlines this kind of painting of the Israeli public as supportive or somehow complicit in the attacks that we see by extremist settlers in the West Bank. Obviously, the percentage, like Ali said, is very low when you're looking at the overall population that exists in the West Bank, although it is, of course, a very serious issue that Israel must confront. Are these attacks reflective of what the Israeli public believes needs to happen?
Categorically not. First of all, the government maybe has the support of a third of the public at this point. These are minority even within the government. It's impossible to defend what the extremist settlers are doing. The entire security establishment is against it. I don't think the Prime Minister is in favor of it, but the two main ministers that have to do with policing the West Bank and policing the Jews in the West Bank are clearly enablers of this. Well, they may not instigate it, but they clearly are enablers. So the result is that the handling of this disastrous problem that besmirches the entire country has been a very light touch, very forgiving, looking the other way, making arrests where they absolutely have to, but not nearly enough to de-incentivize the radicals that are doing it. And these two ministers, by no means reflecting either the policies of this government and certainly not the people of Israel. But these two ministers in question, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, represent an extremist fringe in Israel that have dreams of one day the Palestinians being compelled to voluntarily emigrate. And this disastrous allowing of the rampages by extremist settlers, for that reason, is a strategic a danger for Israel itself, as well as being a moral blight and a stain upon the Jewish people.
The fact is, as Dan said earlier, this government, two main ministers of this government are very much in favor of those extremists, and they're doing all their efforts in order not to punish those people who are responsible. I mean, imagine that since October 7th, the Minister of Defense has issued only four the instructions of arresting four settlers.
Well, one thing that really has to be said is an example of the danger this poses. On October 7th, one of the reasons why the Gaza border was so ill-defended and almost entirely abandoned was because significant forces were moved to the West Bank for the very specific reason that there was not just intelligence, but the knowledge that extremist settlers were trying to stir up trouble. And there was an expectation that the West Bank could explode. Right. Instead, Gaza did.